Hello, everybody. This is Derek Slosher, and this is my presentation on present day movements for LBGT rights. Whether you're for or against the concept of equal rights for lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transsexuals, there's no doubting that it's a polarizing issue that is in our faces every day. While many see LGBTs fight for equality in the same manner and in importance as African Americans fight for rights, there are just as many who see the issue as religious, and unlike African Americans, shouldn't receive equal rights under the law. The beginning. One cannot evaluate the current movement without revisiting the past. If you ask any leader in the fight for LGBT's equality, they will tell you that the start of the movement was in 1969. In 1969, there were riots that started within the Stonewall Inn in New York City. At this time in history, there were strict laws in New York that banned anything that had to do with people who were homosexual acting out in public. You couldn't kiss, you couldn't hold hands, anything like that. You could be arrested under their anti sodomy laws. So, because of this, establishments and gay clubs started to rise up. These establishments were consistently being raided by the police. In the early hours of June 28th, police decided to raid the Stonewall Inn. Many of the people who were at the Stonewall Inn were celebrating the life of Judy Garland, who had passed away the day before. While the police had decided to send in undercover officers, both male and female, to observe the goings on inside the club. When the officers radioed back, the police decided to raid. What happens next depends on who you ask, because each side, the cops and the rioters, have different stories. Basically, what had happened was, as the police were escorting everybody out of the club, there was a lot of fear of being outed because there were a lot of cross-dressers who were there who came from very strict Christian family backgrounds, and they didn't want to be caught on TV wearing their mother's clothes. Um, After hearing about it and word spread, people were called. More and more gay people within the community started to show up to protest, to where the numbers reached hundreds. Um, the fight finally broke out when one of the lesbians that were being arrested was being mishandled, and she asked the crowd standing around, "Aren't you going to do something to help me?" And then the fighting began. No matter whose side of the story you believe, you have to agree that this moment in history marked the beginning of the fight against gay oppression. After the Stonewall riots, many celebrities who were closeted decided they had had enough, and they started slowly coming out. Um, it started out, there were people like Freddie Mercury and Elton John, who came out as bisexual, and then finally decided to come out as actually being gay, not bisexual, when he realized who he was as a person. Within the last 10 years or so, the two of the most prominent celebrities to come out are the two men that I have pictures of on this slide. First, we'll start with Mr. George Takei. George Takei had always known that he was gay since he was a teenager. He's famous for being on the Star Trek show. Um, Finally, he decided to come out officially to the public, even though all of his close friends knew he was gay, because of then Governor Schwarzenegger's veto of allowing gay marriage equality in California. He felt like he could no longer hide who he was to the public when he was seeing his people being oppressed. Currently, Mr. Takai is a cult hero, not only among Star Trek fans, but among the gay community, because um, he handles criticisms of his lifestyle with laughter and reverence instead of anger and violence. The second man that I have pictured is Michael Sam, who, if you don't follow sports, was a football player for the Missouri Tigers, and he had won many college accolades for being an excellent football player. He before the NFL draft, he had decided that he was going to officially come out as gay, and unfortunately to say, that hurt his draft status. Normally, a player with his accolades and the awards that he won had never dropped out of the first round of the NFL draft, typically past like the 16th or 17th pick out of 32. Mr. Sam fell all the way to the last round, the seventh round, at the end. So when people say that it really didn't have an effect whether he was gay or not, I can't really believe that, because having hundreds of players picked above him who didn't have the kind of collegiate awards he had kind of shows that he was picked late because of the gay factor. Um, the picture that I have shown is when he was drafted. Here he is kissing his boyfriend, and this video and picture caused a lot of problems with conservative football fans. Many wrote letters and complaints to the FCC because this was shown during prime time and their children saw it and it was offensive. There were players that tweeted out horrendous things, like there was a player for the Miami Dolphins who tweeted out OMG and horrible, and in response to the kiss. Uh, but nobody said anything about the straight players kissing their girlfriends or fiancées in the same manner. Um, there was also a backlash against uh, a basketball player from Mississippi, where he had tweeted out that he was boycotting Sports Center until his quote, "This nasty ass shit is off," um, because his little brother saw it and it wasn't right. Um, he didn't say anything. He didn't tweet anything about how offensive it was that other players in the draft had been arrested for domestic abuse or drugs. But no, a kiss was too much for him to deal with. Music and his role in coming out. There was a study done by Arnoff and Gilboa in 2014. They decided that not much had been studied about the connection of music and the coming out process of homosexuals. Um, Throughout the study, they talked to many people and asked them questions regarding their style of music and whether or not that actually helped them in their process. Not all subjects said music helped, um, but some said it did, and it was to varying degrees. There was one man who had said that it helped tremendously. Um, for me, as a straight person, music has impacted my life greatly, and I'm a huge advocate of the arts, especially music. And I can imagine uh, a person who enjoys music like me not really having anyone to connect with on that role. You know, straight people have songs that they can listen to about marriage and breakups and getting back together and things like that. Whereas, you know, over the last 35 years post 1969, there really wasn't a whole lot regarding relationships that were gay. So now that I think that more musicians are coming out, such as, you know, obviously Freddie Mercury, who's now passed away. He was a gay man. Melissa Etheridge, who's popular in the late 80s, 90s, she's a lesbian. And then now current music, Pink, who identifies herself as bisexual. They are giving the gay community something to relate to. Um, I think that's going to continue with further generations once the movement continues making paces of accepting everybody for who they are, kids growing up and realizing they're gay will have more of an emotional connection through music due to these stars. I posted a quote that I kind of came up with that explains like my feelings on music, and I'm sure it resonates with LBGTs, LGBTs coming out. Music stirs that special place within your soul. It's hard to explain what that place is, but when music touches it, it can change every fiber of your being. Political pressure. As you can see from the picture, there are 5 times the number of LGBT parents willing to adopt than there are children in foster care. Currently, there are a bunch of states that outright ban letting uh, LGBTs participate in the adoption slash foster care process. There are quite a few others that have remained silent on the issue, which basically allows the adoption agencies to discriminate as they see fit. If it's against their ideology or uh, religious beliefs, they can keep the child in foster care or in a group home instead of allowing them to go to a gay family. Um, this bill, that Every Child Deserves a Family Act, was introduced to punish adoption agencies who discriminate against uh, LGBTs who can legally adopt. What it would do would remove the federal funding and that they receive if they decided to continue to discriminate based on those factors. The reason why this bill was introduced was because many organizations, such as the American Sociological Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as others, have come out and said whether a child is raised by same sex or opposite sex parents has no bearing on the child's well being. The crazy thing to me, outside of if you throw out all the politics issues and all of that, looking at it from a humanistic point, it's crazy to me that organizations would rather a child stay in a group home that has no sense of family instead of going to a gay family who would love them and treat them as one of their own. The backlash. The backlash against LGBTs and their equality and rights have been about equal in comparison to supporters. The majority of people opposing LGBTs and their quest for equality come from religious groups and conservative family groups. When discussing religious opposition to the advancement of the so-called gay agenda, you have to put the whole discussion into perspective. While many of the protesters readily admit that Bible supported practices like stoning women for not being virgins on their wedding day, slavery, and the treatment of the disabled are something that they don't follow because society has deemed it wrong, still refuse to throw away the verses regarding homosexuality and sin. In her college thesis, Brittany Baker stated that religious groups put marriage on a pedestal. Thus, it is easy for them to claim that same-sex marriage will end the perfection that is marriage. She goes on to explain that since 2004, the amount of married couples is dropping despite the population increasing. Um, when discussing, like straights getting married and the sanctity of marriage and how we respect it, it's kind of interesting because there's so many people out there that have been divorced numerous times and they aren't really attacked for doing so. Both Larry King and Elizabeth Taylor were divorced, I believe, 8 times. My all-time favorite anti-gay protester who is completely insane is Newt Gingrich. If you don't know who Newt Gingrich is, he's a politician. He ran for president a couple different times. Mr. Gingrich has committed adultery at least twice, and he's on his third marriage. The the times that he divorced his two previous wives, they were ill. The first one had MS, I believe, and when she wasn't able to have sex anymore, he divorced her and married the mistress he had been sleeping with. The second mistress ended up getting uh, cancer, and he was cheating on her. And then once she wasn't able to have sex anymore, he divorced her and married his third wife. I believe, if I remember right, the quote, the reason why he said he did it was because of the fact that he loved his country too much and he was working too hard and he had lost his way. Um, Conservative groups who oppose, they oppose for reasons of morality and protecting children. They use scare tactics like the commercials that ran during the Prop 8 issue in California. These commercials were put on by the Mormon Church as well as other family organizations. The one commercial that stuck out that ran the most was a little girl who came home from school all excited and said, "Mommy, Mommy, my teacher said when I grow up, I can marry a princess." And then the person doing the voiceover said, "What are you going to do when your child comes home and says this to you?" Vote no on Prop 8. So basically, what they were saying was that, instead of sitting down and discussing the situation with your children as people, we have to ban everything that might negatively affect them in their opinion. Um, the commercials allude to the fact that uh, having gay families and gays being able to marry will cause social morality or social immorality, and that previously before that, uh, there is no social immorality amongst straight families. Um, Within the last, I don't know, couple decades is when families when gay couples had decided to start having children of their own or adopting. I believe before that there were still robbers, rapists, and killers, and they were raised by straight people. So I don't really see how that argument is valid. How society views LGBTs. On this slide, I have a quote from a study done by Alan Gross, Susan Green, Jerome Stork, and John Van Eur. This study was done in 1980. It basically talks about how, um, in this study, they showed videos of both gay men and lesbians coming out in a video, and then gauged subject's reaction to the video. Um, with all the way across the board, it showed that each gender was more stereotypical towards with the videos of the gay people of their own gender. So straight men were more critical and stereotypical of gay men, and straight women were more stereotypical and of lesbians. Um, they believed that the findings suggested that homosexuals are judged more stereotypically by members of their own sex, perhaps because each sex is aware of its own sex role boundaries. So basically saying that as we grow up, American boys are supposed to be tough and we're supposed to go fight wars and protect our women, and we're not ever supposed to cry or, change diapers. Whereas the women are supposed to be caring and loving and not ever supposed to be hard and not want to work on cars and things like that, where a lot of the stereotypes that are thrown at gay people, especially like the men, are fairies because they're sensitive or they have a higher rate of pitch in their voice, and lesbians are masculine dykes because they like to work on cars and do construction, and they dress in man clothes. And I think that all alludes to the fact of how socially we raise our children with the gender roles of this is how you need to act because you're a boy, or this is how you need to act because you're a girl. Politicians. Um, Politicians have both helped and hindered the movement for equality in terms of gay rights. Um, in this slide, I have pictured both Michelle Bachmann, who's probably the not only the biggest anti-gay politician, but in my opinion, one of the most crazy, as well as the three Iowa judges who were voted out for allowing gay marriage. Um, let's start with Bachman. As you can see in the picture, one of her quotes had said, normalization of gayness through desensitization. Very effective way to do this with a bunch of second graders is take a picture of the Lion King, for instance, and the teacher might say, did you know that the music for this movie was written by a gay man? The message is, I'm better at what I do because I'm gay. Um, Obviously, when you have somebody that is a well-known politician and they say things like this that more moderate people would view as crazy, there are some hardcore conservatives who love these kind of things that she says and say, that actually makes sense to me. Whereas realistically, no child is going to equate the two as, yes, a gay man did write that, but they're not going to say, oh, maybe if I become gay, I can be a music star too. I just really don't see that as being logical. Um, as far as the three Iowa judges that were voted out for allowing gay marriage in Iowa, they there was oh I think he ran for governor, Bob Vanderplots. He had gotten a lot of money and donations from Pizza Ranch, who is based in Iowa and is a conservative, uh, family oriented Christian organization. And they donated money to him for his fight to oust the three judges who said that banning gay marriage was unconstitutional, and he was successful. Unfortunately, during the recall votes, more conservative Christians who opposed it came out and voted than the uh, pro equal rights gay movement, which caused them to lose their jobs. Victories. In the picture, you can see President Obama standing with three women. He had just signed an executive order adding attacks on people of uh, because of their sexuality or their gender status, as well as their race, to the hate crime legislation. The reason why he did this was because of the men, Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr., who is family members with the ladies in the picture. Um, Matthew Shepard was a gay man who was murdered after a night out at the bar. He was convinced to leave and go hang out with these two guys. They took him out into a secluded area. They stripped him. They beat him horribly and tied him to a fence and left him, and he ended up dying. James Byrd Jr. Was killed in Texas. He had an altercation with some white supremacists, and they chained him to the back of their truck and drug him all the way through town, basically tearing his body apart and killing him. Excuse me. In response, President Obama had decided to draft this executive order and making it a hate crime and adding more time to their sentences because of the reasons they attacked these two men. Victories continued. In the picture are the 5 Supreme Court justices who struck down key parts of DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. The quote that I have here was found on Britannica.online.com. It said, on June 26, 2013, the Supreme Court issued a ruling nullifying parts of the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, the 1996 federal legislation that defined marriage for federal purposes as a union between one man and one woman. The court's 5-4 decision in the case, United States v. Windsor, also invalidated DOMA's definitional section and thus made federal benefits available to married same-sex couples. The IRS announced in late August that same-sex spouses would be treated the same as other married couples for federal tax purposes. This turn of events, less than a decade after Massachusetts became the first state to recognize such marriages in 2004, was clear evidence that the legal normalization of same-sex marriage may have had quicker success than any other social movement in American history. Victories continued. As you can see from the picture on the left, it's very colorful, and this illustrates the states that have been approved for same-sex marriage. There's 19 of them so far, and there's 31 that have not. Of those 31 states, 12 have been overturned in court but are awaiting appeals. Just a side note on this, I think it's crazy that these states are fighting it and appealing it because they're wasting taxpayer money when they should know they're going to lose. If 19 other states have approved it, no judge is going to go against 19 other judges. So this money that they're wasting could go to schools. That goes a lot to say about the mentality when they would rather take money away from schools and educating our children to fight a losing cause. The second picture is of President Obama signing the executive order banning discrimination of LGBTs by companies receiving federal money. So basically what that means is that if you get federal dollars to pay your employees or run your company, you can no longer not hire somebody or fire somebody because of their sexuality or their gender status. Work still ahead. The ACLU wrote an article describing some of the problems still needed to be addressed. They listed 5 things on aclu.org that needed to be worked on. Those areas are basic rights and liberties, parenting, youth in schools, relationships and marriage, and discrimination against transgendered people. All 5 of these categories are very important, not only because they affect LGBTs, but they also affect family and friends of LGBTs. Once these 5 categories are fixed, then the idea of equality for LGBTs will be the closest it has ever been. Conclusion. When we as Americans allow one group's rights and happiness to be subjected to bans, hatred, and criminal laws such as the anti-sodomy law in Louisiana, we open the door for allowing it to happen to everyone. The question is when and where will it stop? Just because you personally don't agree with something doesn't mean it should affect the rights of fellow Americans. I personally can't stand the idea of organized religion, yet I don't protest in front of churches or seek to have religion outright banned. I believe that in our country, you should have the right to do whatever you want as long as it doesn't legitimately put society as a whole at risk. I also believe that gay marriage will in fact strengthen the institution that straights have destroyed through divorce. I stand by the belief that all men are created equal and that history will be the judge of who's right and who's wrong. and I believe I'm standing on the right side of history. Thank you for taking the time to watch my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Reference page.